Okay, there is one contest actually. Two minutes, guys. So actually, we are going to conduct one current contest, simple questions. It will be available for next 1 week. So I'll update that link in the Moodle. Already that account is created. Okay, I'm not getting 1 minute. So I think we had announced it long back. So I'm going to put that link in the Moodle itself. So you can open that in Moodle. If you not yet created the HackerRank accounts, please create the HackerRank accounts. Then you can able to attend that contest. Just 168056. Okay. I hope my screen is visible to all of you. So this is the contest which is being conducted by Algo's team. This is unofficially we are conducting, not officially, but in future they will conduct it officially with proper this thing information and all. Now they don't have permission because they already conducted so many activities. But this just to introduce you guys the HackerRank platform and what exactly these people are going to do. This is a preliminary test, you can say. Okay. So you have to log into this link. This link I will create in Moodle itself, HackerRank contest link, so that you can click on the Moodle and go to that HackerRank contest. So once you open that page, you will get this login page. Here you have to click. Already, I think today it will start. Today 8:15 p.m. it will start, and it will end on July 12th. Okay. So July 5, 8:15, and it will end on July 12th. So right now you can't see the questions. You can only see the login page. So you can read the about message, what are the rules, scoring, and all those things. To attempt this, first you need to create the HackerRank account. Better to please create your HackerRank account with the roll numbers. It will be easy to identify the students, which section, which. So these people will be sharing you the scores in the Instagram page. They are going to have an Instagram page. After the contest, they will share you the solutions also, right? And they will share the toppers list of people who have completed top 10 people, top 100 people, like that. They will share the um, ranking also. So all these things they will be promoting you in the Instagram also, right? So it is a good advantage for those who are interested in coding. So you will build that coding environment in the college for the next 4 years, and they will hire the people who are doing continuously, able to perform better. Those people will be taken into Algo's team, right? So it's a very good initiative by your second year, third year, fourth year, all combinedly they have. But based on your performance, they will select a few students from the first year also. So I request everyone to attempt. Not, it is not force actually. So uh, it is not going to be considered for any kind of future training performance and all. It is to develop the coding environment in the college, right? So you need not to worry about what will happen if I don't attempt. This is truly, genuinely for those who wants to improve and do this kind of activities in the college. So there is no force for anybody to attempt and all. This is preliminary one. Officially, they'll conduct it in the coming months once they get the permission from the authorities. Officially, they will do it and promote in the college. It will be happening officially in the college itself. Now, this is the unofficial one. Uh, Whenever you get free time for the next 1 week, from 5th to 12th, you have 1 week time. You can execute the programs, right? Okay, they have Instagram page also. Yeah, this is their page. So these are the team members, which already are the members here. So they have already done a lot of activities. So once the contest is over, they will share the result for those people who couldn't solve. They will share the results after the contest, and they will also share the toppers appreciation post so that those people are motivated to perform better and better. So it is request everyone to attempt this and get that coding culture developed in the college. Okay. So why do you need to? So a lot of innovative things they're doing, right? They're sharing the solutions also, and they will hire the people who are good in languages, right? Communications. A lot of things they're doing. So this link you need not worry right now. I will put it in the Moodle itself. But if you want to save it, I am sharing it now only. So tomorrow you can practice, start practicing these questions in the lab along with the regular expressions. Regular expressions, I think already I've given enough time, but I heard that you didn't get time to practice the Python because of unavailability of mentors. How many of you did practice the regular expression problems? You need more time. Around 8 questions I've added here in the regular expression. So you can complete it by, okay, completed. Few of them are completed. Okay, today I will add some more questions, but I suggest you to start doing this one because this is bit interesting for you guys. Questions also, you need not to worry. They are starting first contest, right? They will be basic level only. Whatever we covered in string, slices, right, list, and all the preliminary things, how to read the input data, all these things. Some 8 questions are there in the contest. These are questions are framed by your seniors only. So you need not worry about the complexity of the questions. They all are easy questions only. So try to give an attempt. If you have already completed the regular expression, tomorrow you do this. Today I will add some more questions in the Moodle related to Python OOPS, because we are going to start OOPS concept, right? Object oriented programming. Three questions I will add based on the object-oriented programming, along with this hacker rank contest and regular expression. So you have enough content to practice work, but you have to utilize the time and make sure you are learning every day. Okay. So last class, I think we completed regular expression. So a lot of concepts we discussed. So today, I don't want to waste time. We have been telling about the classes, Python, object inheritance, and all those things. So it's an important topic when it comes to the future Java programming, also object-oriented programming. So already we have discussed, I think, enough. And does anyone wants to edit option not enabled for a few questions? Is it? No, I think it's already enabled. Okay. So here deadline was 4th July. Okay. Yeah. I think the date is over already. Today is the last date actually. I'm giving one more day time. Tomorrow everyone should complete this. So for all the questions, I've given 4th July as the deadline. Okay, first 5 questions I've enabled it. So later, remaining I'll do it later. I think from 6th question, I didn't put any date condition. Yeah. So all programs I've enabled it. You can complete by this Sunday maximum. So give edit option to all the. Yeah. I've enabled. Okay. So as you know already, we have started this OOPS concept long back, but we halted it in between for the regular expression topic. But I had spoken enough about class objects, methods, right? What is the importance of that? To handle large amount of data, it is always better to split the data into multiple categories, right? Hide the unwanted data, which I don't want to show to the user, right? And encapsulation means bind related data together. So this concept, I think I've enabled it already. So these are the pillars of object-oriented programming, as you know already: class, object, methods, inheritance, polymorphism, abstraction, and encapsulation. We are doing this in real world actually. I gave an example related to this one in Moodle, right? What is that? Data abstraction means uh, data abstraction is basically showing only related data, hiding unwanted data. That means for you people, if you are belonging to particular section, means you will only see the data related to your section. You won't be able to log into the other section, right? Until and unless we give you the authority to do that. So that is called as data abstraction. Encapsulation means binding the related data together. That means suppose you are doing C programming, next semester you will see Python programming or data structure also you have done it. All the courses you are seeing separately. So we are not combining C content, data structure content, Python content into one course, right? For example, if you see the home page, a student might be belonging to this batches, right? This is one batch, this is another course. So basically, this is called as encapsulation. They are comes under only under one category, but they are still different. They are related. So a student is belonging to two particular courses, right? But still he is doing the things in the one in that particular course only. So related data bind it together, correct? So that is called as data encapsulation. Then polymorphism is able to do multiple things under one name. Under one name. For example, if you take HackerRank as an example, you have every student are able to see the questions, right? So suppose we are putting 8 questions. The question is common for all the students. About what? Brief about what, Sharon? Okay. Yeah. That's what I'm trying to. Right. So basically, class is basically what collection of objects. It is logical entity. So object, I gave an example. Class means, for example, your GRIT is a class. Students are objects. So until students come to the GRIT, there is no meaning for the college, right? That is called as class and object, relationship between class and object. So for example, we can have, you are already learning data structures, right? In data structures, we are creating structure and accessing those data from the object. So we are creating multiple objects based on the multiple students, right? So that is called as class and object relationship. But in when it comes to Python, everything is object only, right? And every object can contain attributes and methods. So attribute means their name, student name, ID, right? These are attributes. Methods means, for example, if you are if you're learning different subjects, those can be considered as a methods. That is called as class and object and method relationship. So in simple terms, class doesn't have meaning until object is created, right? And this object cannot access this methods of the class directly, right? First you need to create the object of that particular class. Suppose there is a CSCA section, means first I should register in the CSCA, then only I can enter in that particular section. So every day I cannot go and sit in some random section, right? So officially you have allotted some section, means that is called as object, method, and class relationship. So class is your college, method is CSEA, object is a student. So this is the relationship between class, object, and method. Inheritance means basically what is that? I told about this in the last few session. So inheritance means using the existing features already available. For example, you inherit some features from your parents. Your parents have some characteristics from your grandparents. That is called as inheritance. Similarly, this is an important concept in when it comes to programming, because I don't want to write code for everything every time. What I'll do is I'll write some code, keep it aside. Then this particular person, suppose he wants to write the same code here, right? He will not write here. He will fetch the code from the already existing class. So that is called as inheritance. So these two have a relationship of parent and child class. So we use the term as parent class, and this particular part is child class. Alternatively, it is also named as base class, right? Parent class can also be called as a base class. Okay. So polymorphism means having one name, right? Having one name, but different implementation. Different implementations. So what do you mean by that? Having one characteristic for all the people, but every time they use it, there is a different result. So how to understand this one? So I was talking about hacker rank example, right? Hacker rank question. So, or you can take the Moodle question also, right? In Moodle, what is the that particular question is visible to all the students or not? Question name is same for all the students, but each student is accessing that question anytime they want, right? Or they're writing different code based on their understanding. So name is common for all the student, correct? But the answers are different depending upon their implementation. That is called as polymorphism. Having one state, multiple behavior, right? Having one state, multiple behavior is called as polymorphism. Data abstraction and encapsulation I already told enough number of times, right? Abstraction means hiding important details and showing only related data. Encapsulation means binding related data together. That is called as encapsulation. Satvik, we have to block you. Please. Okay. So don't send unwanted messages. Otherwise, I will have to block you. Please be careful next time. Please tell me. So I'm removing you, Satvik. Okay. Right. So class is defined using the keyword called as class, and class name you need to mention followed by colon. So what is the definition of the class? It can be defined as collection of the objects, right? For example, if you take an employee class, and what are the methods and attributes it can contain, we are discussing. So email ID, name, and age, salary, these can be attributes. What about methods? So methods can be calculating the salary, right? Fetching the date of joining, right? Calculating the number of years worked, and fetching the details of everything, ID, name, and salary together. So those can be called as a methods, right? Every class has attributes and methods. And object is what? Object is an entity that has a state and behavior, right? For example, when we define a class, it needs to create an object to allocate memory. This one I highlighted in the last session. So without creating an object, your class doesn't have any meaning. It only exists, but it doesn't have any meaning. So memory is not allocated for the class, just like structures you studied in C. Memory is not allocated for a class until you create the object of that particular class. Got it? So how to create basically the class and object relationship we discussed. Quickly, I'll go through. So suppose this is an example program, right? So please concentrate. So we need to use the class keyword compulsorily, followed by the class name, colon. Then inside that tab space is important because whatever you're writing inside that class. So to make sure that compiler considers that within that particular class, give the enough number of tab spaces. Then every class has its default constructor. I will tell you what is constructor. So this particular class has two functions, two methods. So one is a default method, which is called as init method. So how to declare init method? So you have to write double underscore int double underscore. So this is the default method. Even though you don't write it explicitly, it will be there. So that is called as a default constructor, which is used for initialization of the data members. So here again, we have a one more method called as display, right? This is user defined method. Method is nothing but a function actually. So what we are doing in this? Basically, we are creating an object of the class, initializing the values and fetching the data, all through the object and class relationship. So how to create a class basically? So how to create an object? So object name can be just like any other variable name. So here we are using the object name as C1. Then car is the class name. We have to use as it is. Then we are passing some values, parameters, right? So this is called as parameterized constructor. So when I'm passing these values, by default, init method will be called. Okay. So how it is called, you can ask me. It is called through the concept of constructor. So constructor is automatically called whenever you are creating an object. So how to create an object? First, you need to create a object name followed by the class name. In the opening bracket, you need to send some parameters if at all you want to initialize, or else you can leave them empty. This is called as creating of the object. Syntax: object name equal to class name, opening and closing bracket, semicolon. So we are creating two objects here. One is C1, another is C2 with two data, right? Then immediately this constructor will be called. Then every constructor has a default variable called as self. Okay. Self variable. So self variable is mandatory. You can give any other name for that, but a default variable should be there. Along with the default variable, whatever the variables parameters you are passing from the constructor here while creating the object, for them you need to create a separate variables. Okay. So here I'm passing two parameters, means I should have a two separate variables to store those data along with this self. So sometimes you might get confused. We are sending only two data, but here three parameters are there. So this is a default variable which is present by the compiler inbuilt in the init method. Then what is this doing basically? Whatever the parameters you are sending, it is initializing them. So what is the job of the constructor? Job of the constructor is initialization. Okay. It will initialize the data members which are sent through the object. So we are sending two values, Toyota and 2016. That values, right? So this name, we are doing it again, self dot model name, self dot year. So what is, you might get confused here. Same thing we are using repeatedly, right? These are called as what kind of parameters? Formal parameters. These are formal parameters and these are actual parameters. So whatever the parameters you are passing to the class, they have to be again reinitialized through the help of self constructor, self variable. So how we are doing this? You are using dot operator just like in structure. Self dot. Here you can use different name also. No need to have the same name. Okay. Self dot model name, self dot here we are doing. That means these variables have the memory allocated. If you don't do this, even though you are sending this data, this data doesn't exist in the memory. So that is the job of constructor. Initializes the parameters passed in the object in the memory. Similarly, C2 is sending its own data, right? They are also initialized. Separate memory is created for C1 and C2. Then what we are doing? We are calling display function using C1 object. So this is mandatory. You can't access the class methods directly. That means you can't directly write display function. Suppose if I write display function, it is not showing any error, but you are getting the output of only this particular object. Why? Because this is memory is initialized. C2 dot display whenever I'm calling, the control will go to that memory location and fetch the data through that memory location, right? So if you want to store the data in the class, compulsorily you have to use the object dot function name or method name, correct? So this is the format of accessing the class data from the object. Suppose if I change the name here, right? So as I told you, it is not mandatory to have the same name what you passed from the object to the init method. I have changed the name here. You can give AB also. It doesn't matter. So whatever the name you want to give in the memory, that is being given here. And while printing also, you have to use self variable, then followed by your user defined variable. Okay, so till you get the same output. So this is a procedure for accessing the class data from the object, right? So this is initialization through the constructor, which is also called as parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. Why it is called as parameterized constructor? Because we are not just creating the memory, we are allocating some values in the memory also. So what are those values? These values, Tata 2016, Tata 2012, 22. That's why it's called as parameterized constructor. So I've already discussed this in polymorphism and encapsulation law. This is another way, correct? As I told you, here, what is the difference? Can anyone tell me here? How we are printing the data? Here, how we are printing the data, and here, how we are printing the data. Inheritance, formatted string. Okay. No, we are not at started inheritance, so it is definitely not related to inheritance. So here, basically, yeah, printing using format specifier. Okay, that is fine. But what I'm asking is, are we creating a separate method to print the data? Which method is printing the data actually? Right? This is already, you know, that we are using print function, format function here. But what is my question is, when I created the object to print this data, I am not creating a separate function to display the answer on the screen. So who is doing that job for me? The init method itself is doing the job for me, right? So sometimes, if you don't want additional methods to do the printing work, means you can put that print statements in the init method only. So you need not to create separate display function. But generally it is preferred to create separate functions so that you will have a clarity. So 99% init method is used only to initialize the variables, right? So you don't add additional conditions inside the init method generally. But that is the difference between previous and this code. We are not creating any separate function and calling the function like this. For example, person1 dot display. Right? There is no function as display here, right? So obviously you get an error. So how I am able to fetch the data, right? Using the same init method and self.name and self.age. Again, if you don't use self keyword, you will get an error. Now in this case, you won't get error. Tell me why. Why I'm not getting error here? I've used name here and self.age here. Still I'm getting the output. Suppose same thing we will do here. Please observe here in this display function, I have not used self.a, but I have directly used a. Here I've used self.b. I'm getting a lot of errors, right? What is the error I'm getting? Name error. A is not defined. But the same thing when I do it here, I removed a self keyword. I just use name, but here I have self.h. Here it is working. So these are the small differences you need to observe, right? So what is the difference here between this and this? Why it is not showing error here and why it is showing error here? You need to understand. Yes, we are printing within init function. Yes, very good. So basically, whenever init function belongs to the class, please understand. Init function, it is part of the class. That means when you initialize the variables from the init function, you need not to use self keyword again to print the data. That means it is like, init is like a son or daughter of person here, or class. So you can scold them, you can uh, give any instructions to them directly because they are your own children. But here in this problem, here what is the problem here is this display function is like your uncle, right? This is like your uncle and this is your parent, and this A and B is you, the son or daughters. Now this uncle wants to take them away, or these people wants to go to the uncle's home, right? They have to take the permission from this parent. How they want to take? Through the self keyword. So direct access is not allowed because this is a different function. This is an inbuilt function. So when you are trying to access the class variables outside the class, you need to always use the self keyword. So it is mandatory. Okay. So that difference, I hope you understood. And is it always necessary to use the name as self? What did I say? Self can be any name. So please remember that, because in a lot of the codes you will be seeing self variable name, but it is not necessary to use self always. You can give your own name also, right? It will work. But if this is the first variable, everywhere you have to use that only to initialize. See, this has to be initialized again with var.name, var.age, and here also while accessing you have to use var.age. So by default, compiler gives you self keyword, but you can alter it and you can use it whenever you want to. Then what is the self parameter? I already told you. The self parameter refers to the current instance of the class and access the class variables, right? Access the class variables directly. And what is the condition? We can use anything instead of self, but it must be the first parameter of any function which belongs to the class. So what is the line that I've added here? Suppose if you're telling I will add this var here, right, in the end, then I will use var.name here. It doesn't work. So what is that I am trying to say? I will add here. So observe here what is the problem I'm getting. In the init function, this var is coming in the end, and I am thinking that that is my instance, that is my variable which will initialize the data that I'm passing. It will not work. Okay. So whatever the number of parameters you are sending, the first parameter should be the one which will initialize the variables. Understood? Now, according to this, what is the modification I need to make? Can anyone tell me? Which one will become the self variable here? This will become the self variable, correct? Wherever, everywhere I have to use like this now, name.name, name.age. Here also name.name, name.age. So the very first parameter is considered by the compiler as self parameter. So these are the basic methods you need to remember. So what is the init method? Init method is also called as constructor. Why the name constructor means? Because it will allocate the memory for the variables. It will construct the memory for the variables. That's why the name is called as constructor. So some more examples here. So till now what you saw is the variables I am sending to the class are initialized, but this class has its own variable, correct? It has its own variable. What is the variable name? Count value. So this is independent to that particular class. Now here I'm creating 4 objects basically. I'm sending 4 objects. And how many parameters I'm passing? 3 parameters. So obviously, can anyone tell me what is the variable that is used to initialize the values that I passed to the class? What is the name of the variable I have to use everywhere? Here. Now instead of self, what I used, GRIET I have used. This will become as the self parameter now. And since I'm passing 3 values here, to support 3 variables, I need to have 3 formal parameters in the init method. So how many parameters I'm sending through the object, that many parameters should be allocated here. Then obviously this is a mandatory thing. Every time you have to initialize the values. But along with that, I am doing one more thing. But you observe the difference. To access this count value, am I using GRIET or am I using person? I'm using this person, right? Why? Because this count is not directly accessible by the this self parameter. So if your class having its own parameters, own variables, the only way to access them is using class name, right? For example, if I make it see here, I made it as GRIET, but in the end I'm printing the count value. Count value is still 0 only. So I will make it as person. You observe the output carefully. Now that output I'm getting on the screen is 4. Why it is giving me answer as 4 is because every time I'm calling this init method through the objects, along with that initialization, I am also incrementing this count value, right? So it is basically we are accessing the class's own methods using the class name. So you can't access the own variables of the class using self parameters. So if people write that point, right? What is that? You cannot access members of the class directly by the self parameter. So how to access that? So the only way is using class name dot variable name. This is the syntax. So you have to use the class name followed by the variable name, dot parameter and variable name. This is one more difference. Yeah, I have told you, but many people requested. So why we need class? Again, same thing here. Count value is 0. Student.count. Here I'm just incrementing the count value. I'm trying to print how many objects I've created. So I'm just brushing up, Ankit. If you already know, well and good. Revise it. Be perfect in that. Because the many people have missed the class of oops, and if they don't know all these concepts, they can't learn they can't solve any programs. This is a one last time I'm repeating, so don't worry, next time it won't be happening. Yeah. Then one more important point I told you. What is that? Suppose if we have multiple init methods, what will happen? If you have multiple init methods, what will happen? So Python always calls the last constructor, right? So if you are having multiple init methods and you are trying to initialize the variables, it always gives the preference to the last parameter, last init method, right? This is also very fundamental basics all of you should know. Okay, so there are two types of constructors, parameterized and non-parameterized constructors. Parameterized constructors you already saw, but what is the difference here is here we are not sending any values to the init method, correct? We are just creating the object of the class student. Okay, but what is happening here is I'm just calling that particular function init method, printing some information. Then I am using the object name dot show. Then, as you see here, see all small differences I want you guys to observe. Here, for the init method, I didn't pass any parameter, but for the function, I passed the parameters, correct? So I am calling the show function with the user defined value. Okay. Whereas init is not doing anything. So here we are not constructing any data, right? We are directly passing the data to the user defined function and printing it. If you want to construct the data inside the class, then you need to initialize the variables here itself in this part. But here I am not doing that. Directly I'm printing. That's why even self is also not mandatory here. Okay. So see here, if I use self, it will again give the error. In this case, you should not use self. But will it work without self keyword? Right? Again, see the error, type error. Student.show takes one positional argument, but two were given. So what is the error here you are understanding? You are telling that you are sending only one data, but this function has to have minimum two parameters. So though you are not using that self keyword here, internally you have to again through the function you are initializing the constructors, right? You are initializing the variables. So though you are not initializing through the constructor, you are initializing through the functions. So this is here also self is mandatory, but this part is not doing anything. So user defined function is doing the job. So this also I told you already. The parameterized constructor has multiple parameters along with self. Self is mandatory. These are the multiple parameters. Then here we are initializing. So what is difference here now? What will happen if I remove this self? Please observe the output carefully. I removed the self here. I'm not sending any parameter. I'm just calling that show function. So generally speaking, this should work. If it is a C programming, it will work, correct? If the function doesn't accept any parameters, obviously, we need not to send any parameters. But in the Python or in the object-oriented concepts, even though you're not sending any parameter here, self is mandatory inside. Correct? So without self, obviously, these values cannot be instantiated. Again, but if you observe, in this case, if I remove this name, self dot name, I just remove that self dot and I'm trying to print the directly name data, whatever the data I'm sending. Again, here why it is not working, can anyone tell me? So if you observe carefully, in this case, I didn't use self dot name, but here I have to use self dot name. If I don't use that self keyword, I'll get error. I want anyone to tell me what is the reason. So compare this code and this code. I'm just highlighting which part here is. I'm just highlighting this part and this part. What is the difference that you are observing? Anyone? No one? No one understood? Syntax rules, if you don't understand, definitely it becomes difficult to solve the errors. Nobody. Okay. So please, yeah, a lot of answers. There is a self for name. Okay. We are using self dot name. Vaibhav has told the correct answer actually. Self dot name is already allotted by the value in the init method. So that is the exact answer I wanted. In previous one, we just used name. Yes, Sharon, that's what. Why we use just name is the question. Okay. So Vaibhav's answer, I hope all of you understood. What is that? Self dot name is already allotted by the value in the init method. In which case? In the previous case. Correct. But here I am initializing those two values not through the show function, but through what? Through this init method. So this method is responsible for initializing. And as you know already, if any variable is initialized through the init method, self keyword is mandatory to access those values. So here name and other I cannot access without self keyword because this function is not responsible for the initialization. It can only access it from this. But in the previous case, what we did, this init method was not doing anything. We directly told show function, use the self keyword and initialize it. So internally it is initialized it. So that even though you're not using self keyword here, it is still working. So that's the difference. Here we are calling user defined function to initialize. In this case, we are calling the init method to initialize. I hope you understood. If we remove self in init and then we remove self in show function, where you want to remove? Which code? First one or second one? Second one, you want to remove self in init. Here, you want to remove this part. Okay. Then what you want to do? Then we remove self in show function. Okay. Correct. This is what you want to do, right? So what is that? Are you getting the output? What is the error you're getting? Name is not defined. So what I told you, when you are calling init method, initialization with the self keyword is compulsory. Without that, this particular name doesn't have any memory allocated. Okay. So you have to initialize with the self. Mandatory. Hope you understood. Okay. So you understood parameterized constructor, non-parameterized constructor, and finally default constructor. So what is default constructor? When we do not include the constructor in the class or forget to declare it, then what does it become? It becomes default constructor. It does not perform any task, but initializes the object. So this is a very important question. Do we always need to write this init method? Please understand. Do we always need to write this init method? The answer is no. Suppose if you forgot to write it, what does it do? Internally, it will help you to initialize the value, but it can't perform any other extra functionality. For example, in this case, we are using init method to print the sum statement, right? This cannot be done. But still internally, it will initialize the value. So how to understand that? You can see this example. So we have having the class called a student and it has its own variables, right? Roll number, name already initialized, compile time initialization. Then you can ask me what is happening, who is initializing these variables in the memory. So when I create the object here, what is the object I'm creating? st1, correct? Though I am not using any self keyword here, these two values are internally allocated memory by the init method, though you not written it. So that is called as default constructor, right? Then obviously when I am accessing through the self.roll number, self.name using self keyword. But initialization part, even though you're not externally written the init method, internally it is happening. So from now on, what you need to understand is having init method always is not mandatory. If you want to have a clarity, you can include the init method, right? But if you ignore the init method, it is not an error. It is called as default constructor. Okay. Now, based on that understanding, you can able to answer this question. Which type of constructor used in the following program? So can anyone tell me, did we use a default constructor, parameterized constructor or non-parameterized constructor? See, even non-parameterized constructor means here constructor is there, but it is not doing any job, correct? So this is called a non-parameterized constructor. It is neither initializing nor printing any important message. It is just there. So this one comes under what category of the constructor? Parameterized constructor, because we are creating the employee one object, calling that employee with two values. Obviously, when you send values inside the class bracket means it by default you need to understand it is a parameterized constructor. Then this is initialization and this is printing work, correct? Then there is something called as destructor also. Not important to know, but I just wanted you to understand the keyword destructor. Just like constructor, destructor also is there. I don't want to go in detail about it, but I'll just give you introduction. Anyway, you have a full OOP subject only in the coming semester. You will know in detail in the subject academic syllabus. So what is that destructor? Basically, whenever we call the constructor, once your program is over, the destructor is called automatically. Okay, so please understand, destructor is called by the compiler automatically. You need not to call it, but I'm just explaining the concept. Destructor is called automatically once your program is terminated. So by the name of the destructor itself, you can understand what is the job of it. So what does it do? What does it do? It deallocates the memory. Deallocates the memory. Correct? So constructor helped you to allocate the memory and do the work, do the operation. Destructor will help you to deallocate the memory. So this process is actually done internally by the compiler, but I'm just showing you the example. So you can manually write also. So manually, if you want to write, what is the syntax you need to use, right? So please remember this one. If you want to manually write the destructor, this is the destructor, right? The name is double underscore del. Just like here init, here you need to use the keyword del. Okay. So whenever I'm calling the constructor, obviously this is called, then I'm printing the data using show function. Then how to call the destructor? You have to call using that destructor variable name followed by the object name. So what does it do? The object, it will be destroyed basically. I'm just printing the message. This will destroy the object. Yeah, correct, Sharon. Like free function in C language. Very good. So in C, we have free function, right? Dynamic memory allocation. So it is doing the same job like free function in the C language. So this is for your understanding. You need not to write this manually for every program. This is an internal operation. To explain the concept, I've used it. It is not mandatory to delete the objects every time. So whenever you close the program, automatically destructor is called. But you should know the concept of destructor. Suppose see the output. I will just rearrange the statement. Can anyone tell me why I'm getting error here? What did I do? I initialized, then I called the destructor, then I'm printing the value. Observe the output and tell me what is the problem here. So this part you need to understand. S1 is deleted. So basically, we already deallocated the memory for the S1 object. After deallocating, we are trying to call the show function with that S1. So this S1 is not existing in the memory at all. So how can you call that with that function, show function from the S1? It is not possible. So these things also you need to know. Once the object is destroyed, it cannot be reused. Correct? So that point you need to remember. Once the object is destroyed, you cannot reuse it. So just like one function which we have seen, yeah, program terminated. Yes. So what we are doing, same thing. Your program, your class can have multiple functions also. It is not compulsory that only one function it should have. It can have multiple functions also. So this function is doing what? It is printing name and salary data, correct? And this is printing what? The work details. So this is called as data abstraction, if you ask me. This is also comes under the concept of data abstraction. Why? Because sometimes I don't want to tell the people which project I am working on, right? I can hide this data. I can only show them this data. This data I want to hide. So I've separated printing of this data and this data, correct? So you can understand that this is also concept of data abstraction. So we are creating the object, then calling the show function and work function separately. So I can hide this particular function. I can only show this function to the user. So this is the importance of OOPS concepts. We can control what we want to do. It will be totally under ourselves, right? Then there are some inbuilt functions. So to do all this, you need not to write the manually for every time. There are some inbuilt functions to do these jobs. Which job? Basically, whether the data is initialized or not, or whether the attribute is initialized or not, right? So there are 4 built-in class functions in Python: get attribute, set attribute, delete attribute, or has attribute. So using these functions, you can verify whether the objects are created properly or not. What is attribute here? Can anyone tell me? What do you mean by attribute? Attribute is nothing but variables of your class, variables of classes, right? So term that we are using is attribute. Set attribute is used to set particular value to the specific attribute. So now instead of creating the constructor, you are using the function called as set attribute, and this will fetch the data, and this will delete the attribute data. And this will check whether the particular class has that attribute or not, if the object contains that particular attribute or not, to verify. So how will you understand this code? So please check the code here. We are having initializing, right, through the init method only. We are calling that function with 3 details. But while printing, I'm not having separate method to print. I'm using inbuilt method. So in the print method, I'm calling get attribute function, passing the object name to it, right? So get attribute from the object, which attribute I want to get? The name attribute. So what does it do? It will print the value associated with the name attribute. So what is the value associated with the name attribute? John. So I'll get that John on the screen. So the very basic operations you can do using these functions. This is direct access, right? Here I'm using get attribute function. Here I'm directly accessing. Print s.h. This is also allowed. This is an inbuilt function. Then set attribute. Here I am changing the value of age. Here I've given the age as 22. Now using set attribute, I'm passing object name, attribute name, and updated value, what I want to update. Here I am updating 22 with 23. So this is done by set attribute. Then you can print that value to check whether it is updated or not. And what is this line doing? It will check whether that particular object has the attribute called as ID. So how many here? What is the object we have created here? Name, ID, and age, right? So the ID attribute is existing for this S object, right? So it will return true condition. Okay. Then delete attribute, as the name itself says, if you want to delete any attribute value from the class, you can delete it using delete attribute. So age attribute I'm deleting on this line. Okay, del attribute s comma age. So these are some inbuilt functions you should know. Generally, not that necessary, but this will help you to understand the internal operation. So in this case, suppose this one and this one, what is the difference? This is also doing the same thing. This is also doing the same thing. But backbone for this statement is this only. So internal operation for this print s.age is get attribute only. Internally, compiler is calling get attribute only. Here, what I am doing is manually I'm calling. Here, compiler is calling internally. That's the only difference. Then this is a different way of using those functions based on the necessity. Suppose when I want to print certain data, I need not to create separate display function, right? In this case, I want to print student marks. I am calling get attribute function class. See, in this case, what did I create any object here? Please observe carefully. Did I create any object in this code? Like S1 equal to student. Right? So I have not created any object, but still I am doing the initialization. I'm trying to access the values all through the help of the inbuilt functions. So here, these two values are initialized. Now, what you are understanding with these functions is To access the class methods, I told you that class methods or class variables can be accessed only using class name. Yes or no? I told you that you have to use the class name followed by dot and the variable name. But here I'm directly accessing them with the inbuilt function. So I'm getting the attribute name from the student class, right? Similarly, attribute from the student class marks. Then these are used to set the attribute names. Here already one value I printed. Then again, one more student data I created, student name, right? Student marks. So two times I'm able to initialize the values without creating the object. This is also one important question. So in order to work with Python OOPS, is it always mandatory to create a object? It is always mandatory to create object? No. So here I have a class that is more than enough, right? So inside the class, I already have the data. I'm working with that. So this is basically the difference I wanted you to understand. So object is necessary, obviously. Object is necessary, which will help you to reduce the complexity of the code, but it is not mandatory. It's not mandatory. Okay. It is like saying traffic signal is there, you have to follow. That is a rule. But is it mandatory to follow? No, it depends on the individual. Signal, if you are waiting in the signal until the signal is given, that is the rule. But it is not mandatory that everyone will follow that rule. Okay, that difference you should know. Then there is some inbuilt function called as ease instance. So this also is important. In ease instance will help you to understand whether that particular object, whatever the object you are creating, belongs to that particular class or not. Here I've used something called as pass, class student pass, class marks pass. So what does this mean? Basically, these are called as empty classes without any data. So you can call them, you can still create the object of this class, right? So in that case, you need to at least write pass keyword. You can't create class student and keep everything empty. So pass keyword is mandatory. At least you should have some default initialization. So you can understand that this is a default initialization. So here we are creating two objects, one of the student class and another is of the marks class. Then in this line, we are checking whether this object student one belongs to the student class. Correct? So this is the object, right? Student one. So this ease instance will help me to verify that. So what is the output I'm getting here? True I'm getting because student one is object of student class. Similarly, I'm checking in the next line whether this marks one is object of student class. So obviously it is not an object of student class, it is an object of marks class. So that is why I'm getting the answer as false. Okay. So this is a useful feature to check because in real time you're working with a lot of objects. So before continuing the operation, you should verify whether that particular object belongs to the associated class or not. Okay. Then print what we are printing, whether it is a object is a subclass, right? Is subclass student. Obviously, this object is basically this student is a subclass actually. It is not an inbuilt class, right? You are creating these classes manually. So they come under built-in object called as class. So this also check whether this is a class or not. So instance will check whether object belongs to that class, whether this belongs to this class. Subclass will check whether it is an actual class or not. Okay. Then I'm doing some operation here with the help of this attribute functions. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I have some inbuilt values for the student class, right? Then can you tell me what is the difference here? Please note all small coding differences you should know. What is the difference from 1 to 5th line? What is happening here? Please observe this code. What is happening there? Is there any similarity or is there any difference? Anyone? Class is ending. Okay. Understood? So here the correct answer is given by roll number B2. Okay. So here we are ending the class. Obviously, these two comes under the class, initializing within the class. But here we are trying to initialize outside the class. So obviously, when you want to create a new variable belonging to this class, obviously, what is the rule I told you? You have to use the class name. Compulsorily, you have to use the class name followed by the dot, followed by the new variable. So what is the new variable I'm creating? Student underscore class. V is the class name, basically. So this is also sometimes you will get confused when you don't know the rules. Then what is that we are doing here in this code is we are understanding how to access this class values, right? Using for loop, just for the printing purpose. So I am accessing these two. What I am accessing? Attribute and value. So this is attribute and this is a value. There is an inbuilt function called as VARS. VARS. So what is VARS? Variable arguments, variable number of arguments. We are checking whether this particular attribute value through the VARS function, we are fetching the items from this particular class, right? So what is a parameter you need to pass for VARS? The class name. So please remember the syntax. In VARS, what is a class name? Student. Then dot items will give you the access to these values, dot items. Then if not, attribute dot starts with, this is the self, basically underscore means it is a self thing. We are printing that attribute value pair. If there is a initialized value, we are printing that attribute value pair. This is just a printing format, but I'm just accessing the attribute value pair and printing on the screen. Then we can also delete. See, we are deleting the one particular value, that is name we are deleting. Then again, I am just checking. So what is this line doing? It is just checking whether the attribute value pair exists. So how many value attribute value pair exist, that many values it is printing, right? So this is the way to access the class members. One way, another way to access the class members directly. So we are, yeah, fifth line is globally declared, yes. So this is all foundations you need to know how to create object, what is necessary, what is not necessary, what are the different way to access the values, right? Here also we directly access the value, correct? Here we access using this VARS function. So what is the help necessity of this one? It will help me to print all the values at a time, just like for loop. This will help you to, like dictionary, you know, right? Dictionary key items. So it will help you to get key and value pairs at a time and ask you help you to print those data. So this is basically all about classes, objects, and methods. So if you have this basic knowledge, you can solve a lot of programs. Okay, so let me quickly go through a few questions so you can interact. Let me see who will give me the answers. Okay, so see the question and answer. Which keyword is used to access the attributes and methods of superclass? Or this one, okay, I'm not at taught. Yeah, that you can say. This is basically related to inheritance. I'm not at taught this. The answer for this is super actually. It comes under the next topic, but by mistake I added now only. That you can answer only after knowing Python inheritance. Okay. Then what is polymorphism in Python? Second question. An object to take on many forms through inheritance, changing the data type of variable accessing private attributes and methods from outside class, hiding the implementation of the class, creating multiple instances of the class. So what is the correct answer? D. Someone gave me D for this. Any other answer for this question? E. Somebody gave me E. A. So a lot of varieties of answers you are giving. So correct answer will be inheritance. An object to take on many forms through inherit. I told you now, one function behaving different times based on the different values. Correct. So the answer for this correct answer is A. Then what is the purpose of inheritance in Python? To create multiple instances, to define class attributes, to allow objects to share attributes and methods of a parent class. Is this the correct answer? Okay, so all of you are giving C. Correct. So in Python, a constructor method in a class is defined with what? This everyone should answer. This question everyone should answer. Okay, yeah. So if you understood the session today, you would have answered this. A constructor method in class is defined with the name init method. Right? I think it is repeated twice. Okay. Then, which of the following keyword is used to create an instance of the class in Python? Object. See, there is a keyword actually, which I didn't tell you. You can also create an object using new keyword. Okay. This is actually in Java, they do it using new keyword. In Python, it is not mandatory. You can directly write statement like this. Object name followed by variable name. But in Java, they do something like this. S1 equal to new car of something like this, they will do. That is in Java. Okay. Next question. Which of the following is not pillar of object-oriented programming? Which of the following is not pillar of object-oriented programming? Not the pillar. E. Okay. So inheritance mandatory, encapsulation mandatory. Without these features, you can't call it as object-oriented programming. Okay. So iteration is not the correct answer. See this pseudocode. Will we get the output on the screen? If we get the output on the screen, what type of constructor we are using? Does it come under parameterized constructor or does it come under default constructor? Okay, output you will get 10. Fine. So output we are getting 10. So my question is whether it is a parameterized constructor or whether it is a default constructor. Default constructor. Okay. So some answers are saying parameterized. Why is parameterized? So this confusion, please clarify. Am I sending any value to this my class function here? I'm not sending any value, right? But how we are initializing the value? I'm just calling the constructor. Directly, I'm assigning the value. Directly, I'm assigning the value, some random value to this X variable. So this is a difference which you need to know. So when I don't send the value here, it doesn't mean that values cannot be instantiated. These are the direct values I'm initializing in the X, correct? So this comes under default constructor. Through the default constructor, we can initialize the values also. Hope all of you got the clarity, those who gave the answer as parameterized. The same question I have modified a little bit. Now, will we get the output for this? Actually, this is related to inheritance, but you can think of it. This is inheritance actually. So we have two classes, class A and class B. Then we have mentioned that in the bracket of class B, we mentioned A. So what does it mean? B is the child class, A is the parent class. A is the parent class. That means this B can access all the parameters of the parent class, all the values of the parent class. Then we are creating the object of the B. Then we are printing that value. Okay. So this is the inheritance topic. Inheritance. So this has its own init method. This has its own init method. It is initializing X. This one is initializing Y. So let me see the output. So what is the error I'm getting? B object has no attribute called as X. So what does it mean? We told that, right? We told that in the inheritance, what is that I told you? Inheritance means parent child class can access all the values from the parent class. Child class can access data from parent class. This is the standard definition. But in this code, though, we get the output as 5. Okay. But in this code, we are not getting the output. There is a reason behind it. Because, see, which object we are creating here? We are creating the object of B class. Right? Object of B class. That means this constructor is called directly. We are calling which constructor? B's constructor we are calling. So only Y has initialized. I'll try to print Y. So there is no problem. If I mention obj.y, I'm getting the output as 10. But I'm trying to access X. Why the problem X is not getting the output? Because it is not at all given the memory allocation. Okay. Memory is not allocated yet. So without allocating the memory, how can you access this data from B? Right? So this is not possible. So to understand this question, the first question you will able to see here. What is that? Which keyword is used to access the attributes and methods of superclass in the derived class? Superclass means parent class, derived class means child class. A lot of terminologies they are using. Any one if you remember, no problem. Superclass is also parent class, derived class is also known as child class. So the same code I have just modified a little bit. Here what I'm mentioning, see here, there is a keyword called as super. What I'm telling the compiler, before initializing my values, you fetch the data from class A. That means you initialize the data from class A, right? So without initializing this data, you cannot directly access from the object. So this super keyword is helping me to access all the data members of the parent class. And we are initializing this class A members through class B indirectly. So that is the importance of super keyword. So in this case, we don't get any error. Understood? This problem you won't get if you are initializing the object of A. Understood? See here, I will comment line this. In this case, there is no problem because I am creating the object of A. By default, this A will call the A's constructor. Then we are printing that. But what was the problem previously? We were creating the object of B and I am telling the compiler, I am the child of A. So give me the access to X. That's what I'm trying to say. But that is not going to happen until this X has its own memory location. Got it? So this is the some rules related to inheritance. A lot of questions I'll make you practice. Just I'm introducing you concept of inheritance. Understood? So now you'll get to know what is inheritance. So generally they use the term as base class and derived class. So how to create inheritance? So inheritance is not something apart from class and object and methods. It is part of that, but extra feature. We are having a class as cricketer, right? And it has its own method called as batting, and we are printing some data. Then there is another class called as all-rounder. If you see, this is the inheritance. Why? Because this all-rounder class is accessing the features from cricketer class. So inside the bracket, whatever you mentioned, that becomes the parent class, and this is the child class. And this class also has its own function called as bowling. Now, when I'm creating the object, if you observe, I'm creating the object of all-rounder class. Okay. But I'm able to access both the functions of cricketer class also or all-rounder class also. So if you see, bowling function belongs to this all-rounder class, batting function belongs to the cricketer class. Understood? So I need not to write this batting separately here once again. That is the beauty of inheritance. So I need not to write this function multiple times based on my necessity. So I'm just fetching this information from this class directly with the help of inheritance. So this is the importance of, it looks somewhat like indirect recursion. Yeah, you can think like that. That is basically a rule. Yeah. See, internally, everything is operated through pointers, recursion only. So when we are doing the training for the seniors, your second year people, now they are understanding the how much interesting the recursion is. But generally in first year, we are ignoring the recursion. We will only learn some basic problems and we ignore. But in training activity last week, we just made them solve so many problems. That time they are enjoying that recursion part basically. So with the help of recursion, a lot of things can be made easy. So just few examples I'm showing you. A lot of things we are doing through the recursion. Circular shifting, right? Reverse string using recursion. So we conducted a lot of assessment tests based on recursion actually. Assessment test 5. Okay, so if you see here, find first capital letter in a string using recursion. Hailstone sequence of given number using recursion. This is a run rate of a team using structures. Basically, all the topics that you learned in the first year, we are making them solve in a different way so that they understand the importance of those topics. So please go through the recursion. It will be easy when you come for training. A lot of problems we are making a solve through the recursion topics. Okay. All the modules are already enabled. It is also enabled. I think it's not enabled. Okay. We'll make sure that is enabled. But already deadline is over for that now. How many times you will, till how many days you will do all the modules? Now, when I start adding the OOPS concepts, you won't get time also, right? So one more thing I want to tell you, maximum another 3 sessions we can do. So next week, probably 12th, 19th, and 26th. Maximum 3 sessions we are possible. After that, we have been informed that we should be given time to prepare for exams. So in these 3 sessions, so make sure that you are practicing all the modules. Okay. Okay, we are running out of time actually. Fine. So hope you got some curiosity about class, object, inheritance, and all those things. I will add few questions. If possible, you try it. Try solving using object class method. If you don't understand, I will explain those problems in the next session. Or you can take the help of mentors and you can solve the problems. So two, 3 problems maximum I will add based on today's session. Today's session, object class and methods. Okay. Fine. So please remember this session, this one. Why it is asking me every time to register? Login. So anyone please open that link and check whether it is working or not, because I'm not able to see the questions. July 5th, 8. Okay, okay. Still 8:15 is not right. It will open exactly at 8:15. So please go through this link and start solving tomorrow these problems. Okay, fine. So we'll meet you in the next session. I will share this notes also. You can go through this notes, whatever we discussed today. Fine. So see you in the next session.